Last week was quite a week, from vicious attacks on Supreme Court nominee Judge Last week was quite a week, from vicious attacks on Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to Will Smith slapping Chris Rock during Sunday night's Oscars. We have a lot to talk about. I have a panel of legal experts and historians, and my favorite movie critic is here to help us break it all down. All coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Last week, for 2 grueling days, we witnessed Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson endure the most vile attack on her character and on her judicial record by Republican members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Some experts opine that the attacks were motivated by Judge Brown Jackson's race and her gender. Now, others are pushing back, arguing that she was treated no differently than any other Supreme Court nominee, and that rigorous questioning is standard fare, given that Supreme Court justices serve on the court for a lifetime. Later in the show, we're going to be also talking about Will Smith and what some say was his aggressive bullying move against Chris Rock. Did it undermine his brand? Did it embarrass him and his entire family? And what does it say about celebrity justice? Well, here for our first panel is Dr. Peniel Joseph. Dr. Joseph is the founding director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas at Austin. He is the author of multiple books, including The Sword and the Shield. And he has a new book coming out called The Third Reconstruction: America's Struggle for Racial Justice in the 21st Century. Good morning and welcome, Dr. Joseph.
Good morning.
Dr. Joseph, you wrote a compelling op-ed article for CNN.com. I read it. I was compelled to reach out to you on Twitter and then to have you on the show to talk about it, because the title of your article, which is what caught my attention originally, is "The Racist, Sexist Mudslinging at Ketanji Brown Jackson." You say it's disgraceful. I want to talk about a couple pieces in the article, Dr. Joseph. First, you talk about Judge Brown Jackson's origin story. Why did you highlight that, and why is that so important for us to focus on?
Well, I think that she's an example of the American dream. It's just a Black woman as the high point of the American dream. You know, in 2026, we're going to celebrate 250 years of American history, and it's taken 246 years of that history to have a Black woman be nominated for the Supreme Court. So we can see that there's still glass ceilings, because we know that Black women have been qualified. We've had Black women like Constance Baker Motley. We've had Black women who are judges and go to the most prestigious law schools and who are just brilliant legal minds, but they've never been nominated until 2022. So I think that talking about how she went to desegregated schools in Florida, talking about how, you know, she now has, you know, a couple of daughters and she has her own, you know, she's a mixed race family. She went to Harvard. It's important for us to see that American dream, but to see very specifically a Black woman as the face and embodiment of that American dream. Because I do think having Judge Jackson on the Supreme Court brings us closer to the day where we're going to have not just a woman, but a Black woman as president of the United States.
Yeah, that origin story, I think, was some of the most compelling testimony that she gave when she talked about, I was really moved when she talked about getting to Harvard, and despite having these middle-class educated parents, feeling like she didn't really belong there, being very anxious, and then having that other African-American student come over and kind of whisper in her ear and tell her to persevere. I thought that was, I mean, just touched my heart, and I could have identified with it, relate to it, and I'm sure so many folks who have gone to predominantly white institutions like Harvard could also identify with that. I want to talk, Dr. Joseph, about three of the senators who got a lot of attention for their questioning of Judge Brown Jackson. I want to start with the female, the Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn. Her questioning, I think, just tore at the hearts of so many women, particularly Black women. Why do you think her questioning in particular had such a negative impact on us?
Well, I think in certain ways, what Blackburn, and to talk about critical race theory, to talk about move away from Judge Jackson's qualifications into this just whole other sphere, is what a lot of Black women face in corporate America, in high-level corporate and government jobs, where you have the qualifications, but somebody sets up a new mountain for you to climb that actually has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them and sort of their perception of who you are, and that you sort of don't deserve to be here. So they come up with this new set of qualifications. And you could see one of the things that Judge Jackson showed endless amounts of is not just patience, but real grace. A lot of people, as we've seen in our cultural moments, sometimes people snap and sort of lose it, right? And so Judge Jackson, at every turn, they were trying to bait her into losing her equipoise. She was poised. She was very sophisticated. You can just see she's just an incredible person. You can see it, like when you get that. She sat for over 12 hours each day of grilling, and not many people can do that. Many people would lose it under the pressure, and you could see just the kind of strength she has. And I'd say moral strength and strength of character, which is one of the things that my mother, and I think all of our parents as Black people, always try to instill in us, because they know the mountains that we have to climb.
Yeah, I was reminded of Hillary Clinton when she sat for those Benghazi hearings and all the bickering, and she sat there so calmly and she was just so collected. And I think it's something that women, and particularly women of color, are trained to do. We get used to doing it. Blackburn, too, one of the things that she did, she kept talking about these women in her district, or people in her district, that were reaching out to her and who were so concerned and so worried. But it was obviously so one-sided. And she brought up parental rights. Help us understand what we were watching in terms of the culture wars and how these senators were really playing to those culture wars.
Yeah, this was really about this idea of critical race theory, this idea of conservatives really argue that sort of parents basically own their children. It's not even just about protecting their children, which is why, they don't want children who happen to be certainly gay or trans to be able to be themselves, right? They don't want children to learn any kind of knowledge that the parent themselves doesn't approve of, right? So these parents think of their kids as an extension of themselves, but really as things that they own, right? Because when you own things, you can sort of say, hey, that's my car, don't touch it, right? Now, people, even though as parents, and I'm a parent, we are definitely there to be guardians and protect them. I don't own my daughter. My daughter is a free, first grader, that I'm there to protect with my life and soul, but I do not own her. So she's going to, as she gets older, she makes decisions. I'm there to help and protect and guide and offer advice. But whatever her identity turns out to be, I don't own that. And I can't tell her, no, you are not this thing that you feel in your bones. And I think that's what Blackburn and these conservatives were doing vis-a-vis the culture wars.
You mentioned snapping. So when we all watched Justice Kavanaugh, during his confirmation hearing, he took a break. He came back and he did snap. I mean, he was very forceful. He was very aggressive. He turned red and he was, shouting. And some say he was disrespectful and even irreverent towards that Senate body. Do you think how would that have played if Judge Brown Jackson had one of those Kavanaugh moments?
Well, no, I don't think she would be confirmed. Because I think what you saw with Judge Kavanaugh is, even though he snapped and really, like you said, based on that testimony after the break, he actually should not have been confirmed, because what you want from your Supreme Court justices is that equanimity. You want that equipoise. You don't want them to snap in a public hearing, especially when they know they shouldn't snap in that public hearing, right? So
Right.
Kavanaugh really disqualified himself, but he still got the votes. I think if Judge Jackson had come anywhere close to that, you would have heard Democrats, because it's going to be a partisan vote, the Manchins and others would have said, I've got serious doubts about her and they would have said, they wouldn't have said about her record, they would have said temperament. That's what they use for us all the time. So we can have any degrees we want, but unless we come off as cool as a cucumber. And again, what Judge Jackson did, that's what President Obama did all those 8 years. President Obama never flipped out. And these people attacked him. They attacked the First Lady, Michelle Obama, and she stayed graceful too. And that's what Michelle Obama taught us. But again, we all can't do this. But Michelle Obama aspirationally in 2016, she said, when they go low, we go high, right? And the Obamas and Judge Jackson, they're the best of us. They're the ones who can do it. But I want to tell everybody out here, not all 42 million of us, when they go low, we go high.
And I think Michelle Obama revised that after Trump got in office. I think she gave us a little bit more permission to express our real feelings. The other thing that Blackburn did that really, I think, just was so offensive, asking Judge Brown Jackson the definition of a woman, knowing that played into, as you talked about a little earlier, about this whole argument about trans rights and the rights of kids to express, their sexual identity and their sexual preferences. And then on the right, I saw Republican commentators use that to say she couldn't be qualified because she can't even answer a simple question like define what a woman is, and knowing that obviously was not the issue.
Absolutely. And she handled that really well by saying, look, I'm not a biologist. I'm not going to say, because truthfully, we are in an area of transition there. We're in an area of transition of defining, we know what we think of as a woman in terms of biologically, but we're politically and legally, how do we define a woman and protection for women and girls? It's under transition. So she can't speak to that. She can't, yeah. So that was,
they knew that, but again, they're trying to bait her.
They're trying to bait her.
And just like Lindsey Graham, we'll segue over to him, asking her if fetuses experience pain. Getting into that abortion question about, at what point is there life and at what point, should people be allowed to get abortions, but trying to ask her in a way that is somehow devoid from the bigger legal issue that is happening in this country.
Absolutely. And to really get her to comment on that, she's going to have to be ruling on reproductive rights cases. So of course she couldn't comment on that. And she's also not a medical doctor. So she has to, she would look at reports of people who are saying, yes, they can, others who say, no, they can't, right? So these were all questions to bait her into some huge gaffe. And she refused to take the bait. Judge Jackson is a hero. She refused to take, anybody wants to see, I'm sure they're going to teach through her confirmation hearings how you should be dignified and graceful in public, because she did it. And it's such a long haul. There are dinner breaks and little lunch breaks, but come on, that's the same. Most human beings, they can't do that. It's an interrogation. I don't even think it's a dignified, civilized way to get justices. It's really not, The Senate is just supposed to advise and consent, and it's turned into a circus.
Yeah, particularly in this partisan world that we live in, so many of the questions had nothing to do about the law or her ability to adjudicate on cases. One thing she did, you talked about teaching, using her as an example of civility. One thing that she did too that we did not see Kavanaugh or Tony Barrett do is she had such methodical, thoughtful answers about legal issues. I felt like as a lawyer myself, I was back in law school listening to a really thoughtful professor walk you through very complex areas of the law. And we didn't see those kinds of responses from those other two nominees, which again just highlights how qualified, in some ways even more qualified she is.
Oh yeah, no, she's brilliant.
Yeah,
no, she's absolutely brilliant. She's a star. She's a superstar.
What do you think of Lindsey Graham? Let's talk about him a little more. He has voted to confirm Judge Brown Jackson to the D.C. Court of Appeals. Obviously, he has a favorable impression of her. The judicial record that he spent a lot of his time trying to use against her, challenging her on this, painting her as some kind of pedophile apologist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that record isn't new. Those cases were there when he voted for her for the DC Court of Appeal. So what do you make of him?
Well, I think Graham, President Obama in his memoir said that Lindsey Graham's the guy who agrees to a deal with you, and at the end of a spy movie, he double crosses you. That's what this is President Obama's words, not mine. So I would take that view of Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, in certain historical contexts, pre-Trump, he tries to come off as a very reasonable Republican, somebody who you could get along with, somebody who's even might be a moderating force. And then since then, he's gone up and down. He was a never Trumper who became a supporter of Trump. After January 6th, he distanced himself, and now he's back on the Trump train. So I think Lindsey Graham has, no integrity, and his votes and his public rhetoric show that. Lindsey Graham was somebody who said when Merrick Garland was supposed to be the nominee that we couldn't do a Supreme Court hearing because there was an election coming in 2016. Okay, so you say that. I might disagree with you, but I expect you to be consistent. So by 2020, Amy Coney Barrett, with less time than we had to confirm Merrick Garland, they put it through, and I would expect Lindsey Graham to say, well, no, we shouldn't do this because it's really the same case. But he didn't do that, right? So these folks, it's just like not ending the filibuster. When Mitch McConnell, if they ever have a Republican president and they have a Republican majority, they will end the filibuster.
Yeah, no doubt about that. What do you make of the effort by Graham, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley from Missouri to paint Judge Brown Jackson, like I said, as some kind of pedophile apologist? They distorted her record as it relates to sentencing of primarily men who were convicted of having pornography in their possession, and would not recognize in Josh Hawley's case, and we saw the Democratic senators bring it up, that they had confirmed other white male judges who had very similar sentencing histories as Judge Brown Jackson. But I was trying to understand, and you're a historian, you study Black history and the way Black women have been treated in this country. How is it that they were trying to push? Well, what did they want us to believe about her and pedophiles? Like that she loves pedophiles, or that she somehow, soft on pedophiles? We know it was the whole soft on crime. We knew that. But this pedophile and this pornography piece really bothered so many of us.
Well, it was a couple of things. I mean, in the short term, they were trying to prove the QAnon theory that Democrats are connected to a wild sex trafficking and child pornography and pedophilia ring. And we know this has been going on for the last several years. They said Hillary Clinton was one of the ringleaders. They said there was a pizza shop somewhere very obscure, and you had QAnon folks come with guns to that pizza shop. I think in the long term, though, the idea of smearing her through sex cases is this long-term smearing of Black women and trying to defeminize Black women. And by that, I mean, in the context of American capitalism and patriarchal capitalism, white womanhood has always been defended. In fact, it doesn't mean that there wasn't sexism and misogyny against white women, but they were defended to the extent that they were accorded a kind of protection as long as they agreed to racial segregation, the lynching of Black men, the marginalization of Black women. Black women have never been accorded the same treatment. So a great example of this is the rape and sexual assault that occurs against Black women and girls during antebellum slavery, but also after. So there was a really a legal notion, and you know this as a lawyer, that you couldn't rape a Black woman. Like if a white man, it took us into the 20th century before a white man was convicted of raping a black woman, right? And so this idea of smearing Black women and saying, you know what, we're going to talk about these really unseemly things in front of this woman in a way they wouldn't in front of a white woman, because they want to protect her and they respect her. That's what they did to Judge Jackson. And I think that's why so many Black women were rightfully upset. There's always been a very sick, twisted, white supremacist fantasy about Black women and sex, where Black women can be raped, they can be assaulted, and they don't count as human beings, right? The whole Jezebel stereotype, right? It's not just Mammy, but it's Jezebel. She wanted it. She wanted it, right? And so when you see them talking about things that, let's face it, they would never talk about to Amy Coney Barrett like this. Nobody would. Democrats or Republicans wouldn't grill her on sex cases as a woman. You know what I mean? They just wouldn't do it. So to get that deep into that in front of this Black woman is this idea of saying, well, she's not a woman we have to respect or protect her dignity for. She's just a Black woman.
Yeah, and thank you for that historical perspective. I also felt like they were saying, as a Black woman, that she was not offended by these gross sexual acts involving infants and toddlers and children, that she was immune. Either she enjoyed it or it had no impact on her, unlike a non-Black woman who would have been outraged by that kind of conduct. Absolutely. So that was also very, very, very painful. And as you said, she stayed focused on getting the job. At the end of the day, she knew what she had to do to get the job. I just want to end by talking about Cory Booker. So Cory Booker, in some ways, kind of saved the day. We know that Ted Cruz was cruising the internet trying to see if he was trending, but in fact, it was Cory Booker who got, a lot of praise because he allowed her to talk. He affirmed her. He affirmed Black women in a way that no one else really on that panel had done throughout those 2 days. But there was some negative criticism of Cory. I followed some of the comments on Twitter, and some African Americans, men included, were criticizing him, calling his tears fake. There goes crying Cory again. What do you make of all of that?
No, I think Cory Booker is genuine and has had his own evolution. He starts off as a much different kind of senator, sort of, neoliberal grandstander, thinking, taking money from Google and Facebook. And I think in the last few years during BLM and his run for president, he's really tried to align himself with the language and rhetoric of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and this sort of love ethic. And I think he embraced Judge Jackson in a real intersectional way, where he's learning from Black feminists like Bell Hooks and Black feminists like Audre Lorde, who really talked about a love ethic, right? The Coretta Scott Kings, these Black women who are heroes of American democracy. So he's saying, look, I'm so proud to be in a room with you. Cory's a Generation Xer like me. I think he's right about that. I was very moved by Judge Jackson is 51, I'm 49. I was very, very moved by her. I understand the struggles that she went through, and I'm moved by that. So I think some of these men who are then upset about crying Cory, we've got problems of toxic masculinity in our community too, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd much prefer a man who cries and doesn't assault people and doesn't do things to people and goes to therapy, Black man, than some Black man who's trying to do some kind of strong, silent type who's emotionally and physically abusing people in his household, right? So Cory is an example of I think, enlightened. He makes mistakes too, but I think it's important that he was saying, look, I'm very impressed by this Black woman and everything she represents, and I'm going to openly affirm. And he had Judge Jackson in tears a little bit too, because he's saying your story is our story, even though these white senators don't want to say that you are as American as they are. You know what I mean? They don't want to, because when we look at, that's why we want Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill, because we could have Judge Jackson on currency too. She's as American as when they put these white folks on our currency, right? So we're not trying to say she's more American. We're saying she's as American. That's the whole thing. That's the equity that we're looking for in that court. Senator Booker provided.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Dr. Joseph, for your insights. Thank you for writing that piece. I'm so glad I found it. So glad I found you. I'm going to have you back. You're going to write another piece. I'm going to probably write a response to your piece. Then you're going to come back and we're going to debate it.
It's going to be more complicated. It's more complicated. So it's not either.
I love it. I love complicated pieces. They challenge us, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your work. I appreciate your, your voice is so important, particularly during this period that we're in, where we're all looking for voices that are going to tell it to us straight, but also those nuances, so important. So I do respect the nuances, Professor Joseph. Again, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
All right, my next guest is Dr. Margalynne Armstrong. She is a law professor at Santa Clara University School of Law. She's a returning guest to the special report. Good morning, Professor Armstrong. I don't know, maybe I should take my lawyer hat off and think like a politician. They already have these planned speeches, so they wanted to get their speeches out. But let me ask you this question about recusal. It came up. Senator Graham asked Judge Brown Jackson if she would recuse herself from the affirmative action case that's making its way to the Supreme Court involving Harvard. And she's been on the board of trustee, or is on the board of trustee for her undergraduate and her law school, Harvard. And she answered very quickly, yes. And a lot of people thought, well, not so quickly, and she didn't need to answer yes, particularly in light of Clarence Thomas and his seemingly never recuse himself from cases that most legal experts say he has a clear conflict of interest. What did you make of her answering that question in the affirmative and so quickly?
I couldn't give you the strict numbers about when there's been recusals and when there haven't been. But if you look at recent cases, you see Breyer recusing himself from cases that involved his brother, who's a district judge in California. And Kagan recused herself from the Fisher case because she had worked on the case as a solicitor general in the past. And so we have these justices who have been very, I think, not circumspect, but have been very conscious of the appearance of there being some type of impropriety or influence. And that is actually the traditional standard. Is there a conflict?
But to be clear, Professor Armstrong, there's no oversight committee. There's no congressional oversight. Judges, as you said, use their own personal discretion. And if they decide even to rule on a case where they have a close personal contact, no one can say anything about it, including their fellow justices. Is that the rule?
Well, yeah, there really isn't any supervision or any review of applying the federal rule of recusal, which is that any justice, judge, or magistrate judge of the United States shall disqualify himself in any proceeding in which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned. So that's the standard. And
so the Chief Justice Roberts in this case, he doesn't even have the authority to say to a Clarence Thomas, your wife Jenny is texting Mark Meadows and she's too close and she's identifying her best friend and you might be the best friend, or you just have too many ties. You have to sit this one out. He doesn't have that authority, right?
Well, you can talk to any justice about it, on the side, and suggests that it would be a good idea, but you're definitely right in terms he doesn't have the ability to enforce that.
Force him. Okay, I want to ask you about one last thing, and it has to do with the repeated references to the way the Democrats treated Kavanaugh, treated Amy Coney Barrett. It seemed to be, Graham in particular, had a axe to grind. And although they started the hearings, the Republicans, by saying this is not going to evolve into a circus like Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, we're going to be respectful. They did everything other than be respectful. They did the exact opposite of, in fact, of being respectful, and kept badgering her almost about Kavanaugh. Did you watch those hearings? Did you see how he was treated? Would it be fair if we had information about you and we withheld it to the 11th hour and we brought it on in here and sprung it on you? If confirmation hearings are going to be about, who shot Jane, who shot Mary, and tit for tat, does it mean we should just do away with them altogether? Because that was just so ridiculous.
Well, we can't do away with them. The Senate has to approve of the nominee. And so the idea of kind of tamping down the partisanship of these hearings is something that the Congress should really consider. But we're really at an unprecedented time for what I would call kind of clowning out there in terms of making these shows for the constituents, and it not really being about the standards and qualifications of the candidates who are or nominees who are before the Senate. So it's just another reflection of the kind of terrible state of politics we have right now, in which precedent and decorum are simply not respected.
Yeah, Senator Cruz holding up the baby book, asking her, "Are babies racist? Do you believe babies are racist?" You know, the whole line of questioning about the curriculum at a private school that she sits on the board of, after she had made it very clear that critical race theory, as we've talked about on this show 100 million times, is not something that's taught in elementary school. She said it's not something she uses in making her judicial decisions. It was so performative.
It's so hypocritical. It's completely hypocritical.
Well, we now know that his kids go to a school that has an anti-racist curriculum, so it's hypocritical on so many levels.
Right.
I do one last thing, although I thought that was the last thing. I am thinking now about this whole notion of her judicial philosophy. I watched some of the Fox commentary after the hearings, and that was something that came up over and over again. Well, she's not qualified because she would not reveal what her judicial philosophy is. And I think Mitch McConnell even went to the Senate floor to say that she won't commit to being an originalist, or what is her philosophy, although she kept telling them over and over again her method of deciding cases, but that wasn't good enough. I read one of the experts who said that this whole notion of having a philosophy is really antithetical to what a judge should have anyhow. There shouldn't be any theory that they have as it relates to how they approach cases. Where do you come down on this notion of her judicial philosophy? Should judges have a philosophy?
Well, a philosophy is just a way or just a term for trying to categorize a judge's decisions. And the big controversy for McConnell is originalism. And the idea of originalism is certainly something that was important to Judge Thomas and Scalia to some extent, though if you really look at originalism, it's really very hard to say. How can you say exactly what the original intent was, and whose original intent was it? Was it the intent of the people who drafted the Constitution, the people who voted to ratify the Constitution? Is it what people at the time understood as the plain meaning of words? So to say that originalism is one specific meaning or thing, and I think the point that McConnell was making was that you just don't agree with this idea that the Constitution should be looked at from the framework of 18th century attorney, and that is what he would demand of people because of the current ideological controversies with respect to ideas such as what does liberty entail. And these are all issues that are really on the docket this term. And so it might be inappropriate for her to even speak about these things in a direct way. And the fact is, the philosophy that they believe she has is not the one that they think should be predominant now.
Yeah, it was a trick question anyhow. So no matter how she answered it, it wouldn't have been the right answer. And I guess I was so appalled by this notion that she somehow doesn't support the Constitution. Obviously she does. But even that notion that here is a Black woman having to pledge her allegiance to this Constitution that's written and ratified at a time by all white men, when African Americans were enslaved by the millions, where African Americans were considered to be subhuman. So that whole process was so demeaning on so many different levels. Final prediction: she gets confirmed. You think with any bipartisan votes, any Republican votes?
I doubt it, which is really saddening and shocking because she is so eminently qualified, and the refusal to vote for her would just be for political reasons. But I'm not sure that there are any Republicans who see that there's any advantage to voting for her. There is a moral advantage, and you just have to shake your head that it's come to the point at which this is really just a partisan vote.
Political theater. It wasn't so long ago when these justices with credentials like hers check the Ivy League box, check the DC Circuit Court of Appeals box, that you were unanimously confirmed by both Republicans and Democrats.
Right. She's criticized for being an Ivy League graduate because we have too many of them. Right?
We didn't have too many when they were all white men, but now there's a Black woman. Of course, now there are too many, and we should diversify the court from an education standpoint. We're going to pray. Judge Brown Jackson did us all proud, made Black women lawyers, mothers on so many levels. She made us all very, very proud. And we know that she's going to get confirmed. I think we're all 100% confident about that. I tend to agree with you. Maybe it's going to be one, could be zero Republican votes. But we know Vice President Kamala Harris will give us the 51st vote that we need to get Judge Jackson confirmed. Thank you so much, Professor.
Everyone should be proud of Judge Brown. She's just an example of what you can do in our society when you have brains and fortitude. And so I think she's a wonderful choice. The fact that she was a public defender of her volition, it's amazing. She's bringing such a perspective to the court, and we should all be very thankful.
Yes, absolutely. Thankful and very proud. Again, thank you for joining me this morning, and thank you for your insights. We'll be watching this. It's going to come. The vote's coming up in a couple of weeks, so we'll be really interested to see if there are any Republicans, and just ready to celebrate as we break yet another glass ceiling. Again, good to see you, Professor Armstrong.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay, we have been talking this morning about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson and how amazing she is as a candidate for the U.S. Supreme Court. And we've been talking about those vicious attacks on her. Now we're going to segue into another attack that we all witnessed with our very eyes. If you watch the Oscars on Sunday night, or even if you didn't watch them, if you've been online, you've been seeing all the chatter on social media about Will Smith literally slapping and then cussing out Chris Rock because of a joke that Chris made about Will's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. Here to help us break down what we all witnessed with our very eyes and how to interpret it is my good friend, Reggie Ponder. Reggie is known as the Real Critic. You can hear him on WBEW in Chicago and KBLA in Los Angeles. Good morning, Reggie. And boy, when I was thinking about doing this show, I didn't know we'd be talking about a physical assault on live TV. I thought we would just be talking about Will Packer and the three women who hosted the show. There was so much to talk about even before this, but we're going to get to that because all of that's very important, although it's been overshadowed. But let's talk about what was your initial reaction when Will Smith walked up on that stage and brazenly smacked Chris Rock.
Well, first, good to see you, Areva, and not good to see you to talk about this because I think this really has taken over the Oscar talk. I know you and I are going to talk about something else, but read everything, go to Twitter, go every place, and that's all people are talking about is the slap scene across the world. And I think it's very, very unfortunate. My initial thoughts were I thought maybe it might be a little something into the script, but when I saw him actually slap him, I knew that it did not look phony. It didn't look like, Will kind of hit him and he just turned around, that type of thing, type of thing you do in Hollywood. So I knew that right then and there that it was serious and he was serious. So my initial thought was, I thought it was part of the script.
Yeah, I was talking to a producer friend of mine, and she said that that's what a lot of her friends thought. And in her business, when things like that happen spontaneously, they let it play out, because it could have been a comical moment. It could have been, a moment that added to the production value of the show. That, these things are well rehearsed, so they know what is supposed to happen, and they know that wasn't written into the script. But they didn't know that after that physical assault, which we witnessed with our own eyes, he would then go back to his seat and start, really yelling at Chris and cussing at him and using expletives that had to be blinked out, or, we couldn't hear them in U.S. television, but of course they were captured by others outside the country and then quickly put online. So we got to hear all of the ugliness. First, I just want to give Chris Rock a big shout out, because he handled that so incredibly professionally. He was obviously flustered. He had to then give the award to Questlove, so just stepped all on Questlove, who, won for that incredible documentary. That got totally overshadowed. But I was sitting there thinking, suppose Chris Rock had struck him back. There could have been an all-and-out brawl between the two of these men at the Hollywood's biggest, most prestigious award. Did that go through your mind? Like, what happens if Chris punches him back?
Well, yes, it did, and this is actually amazing to see that this happens on TV. However, there are a lot of angles to this, and Chris Rock, if you asked to put this in perspective, had made jokes about Jada before, and people didn't find that to be funny. I think at the last Oscars when he was actually the host, and then he makes obviously this particular joke. So there was probably something building from that for a while. I do want to step back for a second and say that I don't think that many of the jokes that they had in this show were in good taste, and so they bordered on digging at people as opposed to making fun of people. And I think that there's a little bit of a difference.
Give me an example of another one that you thought did that.
So when I'm forgetting the name of the movie, but the Regina Hall piece about the movie that had never been seen. Mm-hmm. I think it was The Green Knight. I think it was. I can't remember. But it basically tore that movie apart, saying that even the director hadn't seen that film. That you could say no, maybe make a joke and say I don't think many people saw it, but you go far to do that. You could tell that Will Smith was very uncomfortable when Regina Hall did the single man thing. He was like, I'm not coming up there. And the joke that she gave was Jada approved it. Mm-hmm. Ooh, well, that's making a dig, because there's a lot of talk about their sexual relationship as a couple. So going there, I don't know if I'd want to do that. And there were a number of things in that area. Chris Rock's joke about Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz saying that you are not going to win. They both are Oscar winners. They both got Oscars at home. So I'm not saying that you can't try to be funny and go into some of these areas. I'm just saying that I am not sure that the jokes in this particular one were on the mark. And you could even see that people were feeling uncomfortable about some of the jokes as we went along. That doesn't excuse what Will did. I just want to talk about the mood and right. The mood of those jokes, if you will.
So two things. One, I was disturbed by the crowd, the groupthink, the mob mentality that we saw. Obviously, the audience, the participants, the people who were at the award show were taken aback, as we were at home, because they didn't know what Will was going to do either. But yet we saw them clapping and cheering for him. And I have to imagine that, and I'm going to go race on you with this, that a lot of those white folks, when they got in their cars and on their way home, weren't saying those nice, wonderful things about Will, and probably talking about him in a stereotypical way we see Black men talked about in terms of violence and you know, some of those other stereotypes. So I didn't know what to make of all that love fest that was taking place after Will just clobbered Chris.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed thing though. Is that you have so many emotions going through you as you're sitting in that room. I've never sat in that room. Dang, Areva, how come? How come? Why not me?
You will.
But I would imagine that there's a lot of mixed emotions. The first thing that you're thinking is that, oh snap, did he really do that? But wow, there are other people winning awards after this. Aren't we supposed to celebrate this? This is about this show. So I could see that extending to Will Smith. I can see people saying, okay, this show is about the best in film. Let me compartmentalize this for a second. I don't like what I just saw, but and I'm going to talk about what I saw and what he did. But if it is that he put in the best performance right now, I'm going to do this. But boy, as soon as I get out of this room, I'm going to have, I can't fault somebody for that.
Okay, I hear you. You can compartmentalize things. Yes. And we do that as humans. But I haven't seen the people outside the room. Many of those people have so far been pretty quiet about it. There's been a lot of chatter about it, and you're right, it's on every paper, but I haven't, and correct me if I'm wrong, have any of the folks that were sitting around him at that event, have they come out? Have they spoken out about
it? And they haven't, but check this out. So Questlove was in the green room, and they asked him a question about the Will Smith thing. And he's like, well, wait a minute. I don't want to talk about that. I am positive that that is the same thing for the people sitting in the room.
But wait a minute, Reggie. You said we can give them a pass if they were compartmentalizing and clapping for the performance in the movie, but when they got out, they were going to call out the conduct. And now you're saying, well, they're not calling out the conduct.
Why are you going to take me to the Supreme Court? See,
all right. I withdraw that question. Withdraw. Let's move on to the question. No.
No, I really understand that, and I think that that's fair. I think what you're saying is fair. This is what I'm saying is that I think that people are trying to give it a little space. Is that just a little space, enough space to be able to say that there were other people who won. What Will did was not consider that his actions impacted everybody else in that room. So it impacted the Williams family, it impacted Will Packer, it impacted Black people who were watching and are not just readily running to support what he did. So it impacted so much
and
stuff.
Even, you know what, Reggie? Will has wanted this Academy Award for himself for years. So here he is up against Denzel, who has to be his mentor, his idol, given their age difference. So now you beat the master and you step all over your own biggest night. So that was his big night too.
Right.
So, and then I'm thinking of those two little Black actors, those young actresses that played Venus and Serena. They're dressed impeccably. Talk about being in the room. They have never imagined being in the room, and here they are in the room, and we're not talking about the movie. We're not talking about the story. We're talking about this. So as much as he stood on that stage and talked about how he was trying to protect the women in the movie, he did just the opposite. But what do you make of the acceptance speech, not apologizing to Chris, and then those tears?
Yeah, I believe that those tears are, the first thing I want to say is that, from the great Baptist tradition, I go to church here in Chicago at the Rock of Ages. And so my pastor, Pastor Wiley, would say, you don't know what you do when you're in somebody else's shoes. Everybody always wants to say, hey, if it was me, this is what I'd do. So I don't want to go there. This is what I want to say about Will. He obviously had some stuff going on. You could tell that the guy had a lot of emotions. So I believe the tears are right. I'm not judging any of that type of stuff. This is what I'm going to say for myself. I hope that if I'm ever in that kind of situation, you didn't hear me say if I was in that situation, I do. I'm saying I hope. I hope that I'd have enough hood in me to let Chris Rock know that that wasn't right. Enough Carrie Ponder in me, my mother, to say that I don't need to show anything at this moment, and enough God in me to be that I can let it go.
Yeah.
I hope
I
when
love
I'm
what
in
you're
that
saying,
situation.
and I hope that in his reflection, and I think the tears were also embarrassment. I think they were him reflecting, recognizing that he had done something that was going to have this kind of, far-reaching implication. So he's a smart guy. He knows that was going to be the headline coming out of the show. Wasn't going to be the movie. Wasn't going to be his great acting. So he knew that in that moment. And I hope that he gets to that point where he can recognize that he's got to do a mea culpa to Chris, to the women, to Questlove, even the people who were in the memoriam who had died. That got stepped on. So people, the buzz in the room that had just taken over that. And then let's move on. Let's talk about the best picture. Apple streaming, first time a streamer, and then a movie about a disability, people, mostly sign language. I mean, that's not even being talked about.
It's not. I don't know how much. So when Parasite won, everybody talked about it for a little bit. I think with Coda winning, everybody's going to talk about it for a little bit. But I wish that they talk about it for a lot of bit. And I just think that that's how the Oscars go. Is that 10 of, you asked me about diversity, about coming on the show, 10 of the movies of the 23 categories had what we would call diversity in it, either a woman, a person of color, or somebody from the LGBTQ community. 3 of those awards were won by Coda, and if you haven't seen Coda, it is a beautiful movie. You laugh, you cry, and I hope that the impact of this movie would be that people would either learn sign language or be at least more sensitive to people who are struggling through trying to communicate. So if you don't have the time to learn it, don't be so annoyed with folks if they're not exactly where you are. If you need to turn your face around just a little bit so they can read your lips or whatever that is, I hope that this movie has that kind of impact on the world.
Yeah. No, definitely. And that's why, again, we wish coming out of this today, we were talking more about that. I do want to go back to the Will situation one more time and ask you, I don't know if you've read on Twitter. I have to ask you this. You're a movie critic. A lot of Black women on Twitter, some very prominent, defending Will, some Black men too, talking about he was defending the honor of his woman, that Black women are vilified in the media, that this was a medical condition that she has. What do you make of that? This notion that Black men defending a Black woman. Are you surprised? I would just ask you, are you surprised by some of the Black women who are defending the conduct?
I'm not, because we as Black people in this world, there's this duality, is that we want our people to represent us, but then at the same time, we don't want to abandon them. So sometimes we have this tough part about, do I support what I don't 100% like, or do I actually pile on the Black person who did it wrong? So in this case, it's Will Smith, but it could have been Wanda Sykes, it could have been whomever. And I think we have this thing that we play in our heads all the time about, man, do I really want to put this person under the bus? I mean, I know you just got through talking about Clarence Thomas and Clarence Thomas' wife and that whole thing, is that even with Clarence Thomas, one of the reasons that I think Anita Hill didn't get as much support as she should have gotten is that Black people were feeling the same kind of way. It's like, do I really want to?
Oh, Reggie, we uninvited Clarence from the barbecue a long time ago.
I hear you, but we let people back in all the time. That's what Black.
And we're gonna let Will back. You know that. You know Will's gonna back.
We're gonna let him back.
We're gonna let him back to the barbecue.
To answer your question, though, my heart hurts when we so readily excuse it. We just
and we gotta call the balls and strikes. And you're right. We suffer from this duality because we know how tough the rest of the world is on us, and so we have been taught, most of us, is give us a pass. I mean, we're the most forgiving demographic of people on the planet, and we learn to turn a blind eye. We learn to make excuses. We learn, and as we get more people in these spaces, then I think we feel a little bit more comfortable, because we know in some of these cases, if we criticize that one person, that might be the only one ever, right? So we may never see another
This is
person.
the case with Bill Cosby. Is that this Bill Cosby is the poster child for this. Bill Cosby did so much wrong here, but he did so much good in his life in terms of representation of Black people and stuff that we're like, oh, we can't say, do we really call a spade a spade? And so I think that it hurts that a lot of people came to his defense so readily, but I understand it, and we're gonna
give them grace. We're gonna give all of them grace. They wrong, but we're gonna give them grace. Hey, let's talk about Will Packer. Oh my God, have you ever seen that many Black people not nominated? Because we didn't get a lot of nominations, but represented.
Yeah,
Megan is there. Jill Scott is there. Beyonce starts the show in Compton. Beyonce, in Compton at the beginning of the show. We have the Black choirs doing the, in memoriam. We have, just the presenters. P. Diddy is there. It's just.
You got D Nice.
I could go on and on. Oh God, D Nice, who's just blown up everywhere.
You got two bands. You get Sheila E. You have two Black presenters. You have Beyonce kicking it off. You get Megan Thee Stallion coming in as well. So from a representation perspective, you think that this was going to be on BET?
Yeah, that's what I was like. Girl. When they took us to church on that memoriam, I was like, okay. I was feeling Tyler Perry with that. Every Tyler Perry movie has a Black choir in it. Yeah. You think that went over well with the older, established Hollywood that's not used to seeing, Megan to come in scantily clothed, rapping at the Oscars?
I don't think that really bothered them as much as the whole show. I don't think that based on the stuff that I've been reading, and I've been reading this morning from, the Hollywood Reporter to Variety to so on and so forth, and the white crowd didn't seem to have liked this Oscars at all. And
okay. That's the feedback?
At all. I just read an article from the Hollywood Reporter that says that it was uneven at best, and it was one of the worst Oscars that they've seen. So,
wow. Okay.
And some of the critics.
Do we know the ratings yet? Because I was concerned. I'm thinking the ratings are probably going to be high after the show because people want to see the Will Chris situation. But do we know the ratings during the show?
I don't know the ratings. We'll see. Anything that takes about 3 hours to do, you have to make sure that it's entertaining and it's going to keep your attention. And I do. One of the criticisms that people are having is that there were 8 technical awards that were done off screen between 4 and 5 Pacific time. And but yet they had these tributes to movies like The White Man Can't Jump, The Godfather,
Pulp Fiction,
and the James Bond's series.
Oh, so they're saying, why did we do that instead of those 8 that were done before the show?
And I actually feel that. I feel that. I worked so hard in sound editing or whatever it is, and you say that we don't have time, but we got time to do these other things. And
taking those 8 out didn't make the show any shorter. The show was still 3+ hours.
It didn't make it any shorter. So there's several criticisms. One is that. The other one is about some of the jokes. So I do think that, and I don't think that the three hosts.
Get to the hosts. What did you think of the hosts?
I don't think they had good chemistry together. The 3 of them together. And why not just have one? But I understand you're looking for diversity. You're trying to, because you get someone from LGBTQ, you get a white woman to represent white folks who are part of the pie. I hate when we talk about diversity that all of a sudden we act like that there aren't any white people. White people should be a part of our discussions all the time. So have a white person and then have a black person, a black woman, and this is Women's History Month. So I think that was a fine try. I just don't think that the chemistry was all that great. I am so happy for Will. On one sense that he got that opportunity, he was able to do it, and you can never take that away from him. Other than what Will did, I think Will did take a little bit away from Will Packer.
You don't think Will Packer will be hired again to do the next year?
I don't know if he'll be hired again to do the next show, but I don't think it matters. I think, it might matter to him, but he'll be hired to do more stuff. He'll do the Grammys or the whatever. So he will get more shots.
Yeah, the Oscars is kind of a thankless job. So see, let me tell you what I thought about the host. I thought any three of those women could have done the job alone. I agree. They didn't need to be together. They didn't get enough screen time. We didn't see them enough. And when they were individual, I thought they were really the best when they were there alone. So I didn't really, and maybe like you said, they were trying to represent LGBT with Wanda, represent Black women with Regina, white women with Amy. But I didn't think that, I wasn't feeling it together. Who wrote the Regina joke? Who thought it was okay for Regina to rub the legs and bodies of those men? I was cringing before the Will Chris. I thought that was going to be the big story today, was the Me Too move, the moment. Because if that had been a man rubbing up on some women.
Areva, if we had flipped that and a dude was doing all that, we would have had an absolute conniption. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm sitting there as a lawyer thinking, okay, here comes some lawsuits. I was like, oh my God, don't put Regina in this horrible situation, having her feel up on these guys.
And again, Will Smith on that one was like, nope, not coming up there.
Yeah, that was the right move. He did something right. That was the right thing to do.
I'm not being a part of that one, But she even made a pass at Denzel on that one, It was just not good taste. And whoever was doing the writing, because Regina Hall didn't write that.
No.
But whoever did the writing on that, I don't know how that passed the mustard. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I do want to say that that there were some wonderful awards that happened here, and we talked about a couple of them, but I just want to go through them really quickly.
Okay.
The three that for Coda, Troy Kotsur, just absolutely amazing. Best Picture for Coda, phenomenal. Then we get Questlove winning Best Documentary for Summer of Soul. I am waiting now for the concert series that comes out of that, because there's so much material that I want to see. I want to see the whole Nina Simone. I want to see. So I hope that there's going to be a series that comes behind that. Then we get Stephen Curry and Shaq winning for the Queen of Basketball.
Yes.
They won a documentary short, and if you haven't seen it, it's only 22 minutes. It is so moving. It is so powerful. I'm so sad that she passed away just a little bit before the nomination. So, but then you look at Jane Campion winning a woman this is only the third time that a woman has won the best director award. Mm-hmm. Then you look at Encanto. Areva, let me ask you, have you seen Encanto?
I have not. I have not seen.
Let me just tell you, you can go ahead and act like a kid and go see it. If you do not cry, then there's something wrong with you. It is so moving. It is so good. And the representation there is fantastic. And then lastly, I know I'm missing some stuff, but lastly, you cannot talk about diversity without talking about Adriana DeBose. Is that when she was a triple threat in this movie, she carried West Side Story. She danced, she acted, she sung. She was phenomenal.
So and Afro Latino gay woman.
I know I'm missing.
Beautiful. I mean, she's gorgeous. She looked phenomenal. She was absolutely stunning. Represented so well. I loved her speech. Absolutely amazing. And then we had the moment with Liza Minnelli and Lady Gaga. Very touching moment to see her at the end do the Best Picture nomination. There were some, as you said, some really touching moments throughout the show. But overall, given that, go ahead. You thought of something else.
Oh yeah, I had to look this up because I forgot. Riz Ahmed won as well. So when we talk about he got his award someplace else. It was for Best Live Action Short, and that was one of those that got cut in the film. It was for the windshield wiper. For the windshield wiper. No, not the windshield wiper. Excuse me. It was for The Long Goodbye. And Anil Karia and Riz Ahmed, who was nominated for The Sound of Metal.
Okay.
So he actually won an Oscar as well. So this is going to be an extraordinary year. This is really what I want to say about this, is that you don't know what movies are coming out each year. So that's the thing that always people are like, well, how come we don't have any blacks this year? Because you don't know what was in the pipeline. And so I think this is going to be an extraordinary year with 10 of the 23 having some form of diversity. The diversity was very, very strong, and except in the category that it's never strong in, and that is Best Actress. Penelope Cruz was the only person of color, and it's usually never any black people in that discussion. Very rarely.
Funny, we had two black men in Best Actor, but not in the Best Actress.
I know that was a lot, but I had to throw it all in there.
No, I'm glad you did that. The other one, soundtrack, we had Beyonce and Billie Eilish in that category. Do you think Beyonce got snubbed, or do you think it was Billie won the show?
You know, I think that all the songs were deserving. I mean, Encanto, the song for Encanto, I was starting to tear up because I saw the movie. So, and then I had goose pimples when I'm listening to Beyonce just open up the show. But I also felt that song. I don't know if Eilish sung it as well as I would have liked, but I felt that song in the movie. So I think that, you know, it's a toss-up. The last thing I'll say about the Oscars, at least until you ask me 15 more questions, is that they're doing 10 film nominations. I think that is the craziest thing ever. Is that if you have 5 nominations for everything else, but 10 nominations here, the only things that I could come up with when I think about that is that you're trying to give a consolation prize to 9 more films.
Yeah.
That they're able to say Oscar nominated.
And I'm glad. Listen, we're going to end this conversation on that note, because I think what you're saying, Reggie, is what so many of the critics have been saying about the Oscars, is that it needs to be reimagined. It needs a reboot. And a reboot is not just, 3 women hosts. It's not bringing in more singing. I was really disappointed that it was as long as it was. I thought the reboot this year was going to make it tighter. We're going to see a more, compact, compelling show. But they took 8 things out and added 16 things in, and it made it as long. And it was hard to keep, nobody's attention. I don't care how good you are. People don't typically like movies that are longer than an hour and a half. So when you get past 2 hours with an award show, you're really testing people's patience. So great to see you. Grateful for your incredible analysis. Always good to see you and hear what you have to say. You helped me. I was thinking, how did Hollywood think about this Oscar last night. I hadn't read the articles that you've read. Now I'm curious. I'm gonna go find those articles and read them. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by them, but I hadn't read the articles yet. But thank you for, cluing me into that. We're going to keep watching this controversy with Will. We're going to get past it. We know we are. We'll see who gets the first interview. My vote is Oprah. You have any votes on who gets the first sit down?
Look, Will just did Jada a favor because this is going to be all on the red table.
Oh, absolutely. She may get the first interview with her husband. That's true. But I'm thinking Miss Oprah's probably already got her people on this. But anyway, we're going to keep watching this. Thank you so much, Reggie. Always good to see you, my friend.
My pleasure.
All right, I want to thank all of my guests this morning. We just went through all of the hot news topics that happened last week. You know what? Because knowledge is power. Those are my words to live by. Don't ever let anyone take your power away. Be in the know. And when you're in the know, you can understand what's going on. You can decide what the experts are saying, whether you agree or disagree, and then you can jump into the conversation. It's easy. Write a post, ask a question, go on Twitter, go on Instagram, because all of these topics are being talked about every day. And your opinion, your perspective is just as important as those of the other folks on Twitter, on Instagram. So be in the know. Be safe out there. Get your vaccination if you haven't done it. Wear your mask in some places. But remember, we're all in this together.